Let's open our Bibles tonight to 1 Kings chapter 18. 1 Kings 18, begin reading with verse 1. And it came to pass, after many days, that the word of the Lord came to Elijah in the 3rd year, saying, Go, show thyself unto Ahab, and I will send rain upon the earth. And Elijah went to show himself unto Ahab, and there was a sore famine in Samaria. And Ahab called Obadiah, which was the governor of his house. Now Obadiah feared the Lord greatly. For it was so, when Jezebel cut off the prophets of the Lord, that Obadiah took 100 prophets and hid them by 50 in a cave, and fed them with bread and water. Ahab said unto Obadiah, Go into the land unto all fountains of water, and unto all brooks. Peradventure we may find grass to save the horses and mules alive, that we lose not all the beasts. So they divided the land between them to pass throughout it. Ahab went one way by himself, and Obadiah went another way by himself. And as Obadiah was in the way, behold, Elijah met him, and he knew him, and fell on his face, and said, Art thou that, my lord Elijah? And he answered him, I am. Go, tell thy Lord, behold, Elijah is here. And he said, What have I sinned that thou wouldest deliver thy servant into the hand of Ahab to slay me? As the Lord thy God liveth, there is no nation or kingdom whither my Lord hath not sent to seek thee. And when they said, He is not there, he took an oath of the kingdom and nation that they found thee not. And now thou sayest, Go tell thy Lord, behold, Elijah is here. And it shall come to pass that as soon as I am gone from thee, that the Spirit of the Lord shall call thee whither I know not. And so when I come and tell Ahab, and he cannot find thee, he shall slay me. But I, thy servant, fear the Lord from my youth. Was it not told, my Lord, what I did when Jezebel slew the prophets of the Lord? How I hid 100 men of the Lord's prophets by 50 in a cave, and fed them with bread and water? And now thou sayest, Go, tell thy Lord, behold, Elijah is here, and he shall slay me. As we've seen with several other characters, Obadiah, there are several people in the Old Testament that are named Obadiah. I'm not even going to attempt to deal with the rest of them, but I want to look at this one man named Obadiah. I want to see his role, his position. I want to see what God called him to do. I want to see how he began to panic And before you think too much against him, I will prove to you that he is not by himself. Then, Lord willing, we will look at how God gave him assurance to do the job God had called him to do. Let's look at this man, Obadiah. As with many of the characters that we've looked at, he is a man of God. He is a man that feared God, a man that served God. He had some excellent qualities in his character. But he also had some human weaknesses. I'm going to look at his good qualities. Then I want to look at his weaknesses. I want to see the great faith that he had. But then I'll look at his weaknesses and ours. God uses our weaknesses so that when it's all said and done, we cannot take the credit. Instead, because God chooses, vessels that would never amount to anything otherwise, God uses them so that he and he alone gets the praise. I've used Paul's verse in 1 Corinthians many times because I don't ever want you to forget it. In 1 Corinthians chapter 1 and verse 26, the Apostle Paul wrote to the church at Corinth, "For you see your calling," within the church, "you see your calling, brethren, how that not many wise men after the flesh." My wife and I had a good friend of ours, came up, spent the night with us Thursday night. We've known her since she was about 12 years old. She now has a son that's 17 years old, so that kind of gives you an idea of how long we've known her. I told my wife before she got there, I said, "Honey, remember, every word we say will be analyzed." She's a psychologist. After she got there, we started laughing, talking. She didn't think about analyzing us, and we didn't care. But she's a very intelligent lady. You have to be a little smart to be a psychologist, and she owns her own company. She runs her own business, and God has blessed her. But not many wise, not many mighty, not many noble are called. See, even in the line of work that you choose, it should be understood that is a calling from God. But God hath chosen the foolish things of the world to confound the wise. And God hath chosen the weak things of the world to confound the things which are mighty, and base things of the world, things that people would look down upon, people that the world would scorn and consider the lowest of the low, base things, things which are despised, hath God chosen. There again, I have to point out that even your job, your position, your role in life is because God hath chosen you to that position. Well, I got my job because I'm so smart. You got your job because God chose you for that position. Well, he goes on. Things which are not, to bring to nothing things that are. Here's the kicker. If you don't get anything else, get verse 29, that no flesh should glory in his presence. In other words, God chooses people with human weaknesses, with human frailty. He uses these people to accomplish the impossible because God will not share his glory nor his honor with anyone. God uses human beings who are incapable of doing anything on their own, so that when they do accomplish exploits, I'll get it, let's try it again, exploits, only God could do it, and only God gets the honor, the glory, and the praise. So too with Obadiah. He was a great man in many ways, but he was also a weak man. A backslidden man, at least in a couple of verses. Let's notice, first of all, his roles in life. It says he was the governor of the house of Ahab. Now, if you're not familiar with that position, that was a great honor for anybody to be chosen by the king to oversee and rule over his entire house. It was a great honor. It was a very exalted position. Not everybody got to be the governor of the king's house. It was also a very powerful position. He was a man of great power on the world's level. He was heavily involved in the political realm. And yet he remained faithful to God during that time. I remember when we were in Indiana, a real good friend of mine had a young man, his son, outstanding young man, later called to preach. But he decided one day he was going to run for the state representative. And I looked at him, and he and I were somewhat close. I said, Charlie, why would you want to go into a job that 99.9% of the people there are liars and cheats and thieves? Do you want to be corrupted? Well, he lost. Later, as I said, God called him to preach. But you can work in the secular world. You can work in a position to where you work for the worst king of Israel that ever lived. I know a couple of people some in the Frankfurt State House, a couple in D.C., that are as staunch in their faith. They will fight for their faith. They will defend their faith. They're not afraid to get on the floor and testify for God. But they are very, very few. There are some, but they are very, very few. He was also a great rescuer of God's prophets. Jezebel, who was, if there was anybody worse than Ahab, it would have been his wife Jezebel. She is known in the Bible and elsewhere, she is known to be called Jezebel, is one of the absolute worst insults you could give somebody. Jezebel, in part because of Elijah, decided to kill all of the prophets of God. Obadiah somehow got 100 of the prophets, put 50 of them in a cave, 50 in another cave, and he fed them and gave them bread and water every day to make sure that they were taken care of. He took food and provisions from the king's stockpile. Do you know what would have happened had he gotten caught? He would have been killed for sure. They would have killed him as fast as they could build a gallows, or as fast as they could build a hangman's thing. He would have been killed for stealing food and also for harboring 100 prophets of God. So it shows, in fact, that when he was talking to Elijah, he said, do you realize that I feared God and I put my life on the line? I literally risked my life to care for the prophets of God. Took tremendous faith. Took great courage. It took faith every day as he took food and water and carried it to them. It took great faith and courage. And then here comes Elijah and asks him to deliver one message. It's all you got to do. Just take one message to Ahab. Now, he had already proven he was willing to risk his life to save 100 prophets. But when it comes time to do a minor chore, just take one message. Deliver one message, one sentence to Ahab. And he almost goes into a panic. Suddenly he's afraid for his life. He was willing to risk his life to take care of 100 prophets, but now when he's asked to deliver a message to Ahab, he suddenly goes into an almost panic over what might happen. What can happen? In verses 10, 11, and 12, listen to him as he begins to make excuses. As the Lord thy God liveth, there is no nation or kingdom whither my Lord hath not sent to seek thee. And when they said, he is not there, he took an oath of the kingdom and nation that they found thee not. And now thou sayest, go tell thy Lord, behold, Elijah is here. Ahab has threatened every nation around. If they get caught hiding Elijah, he will destroy every nation that hides Elijah. And now you want me, in verse 12, and it shall come to pass, as soon as I am gone from thee, the Spirit of the Lord shall carry thee whither I know not. And when Ahab doesn't find you, he will kill me. Notice the emphasis. It's not obedience to God's word. Not at this point. It's not following instructions from Elijah. Now he is scared to death. What may happen to me? He wasn't worried about it when he hid the prophets. He wasn't worried about it when he took food, bread and water and fed the prophets every day. But now, and that was major. Now he is scared to death of what may happen to me if I deliver a simple message. Why, as soon as I leave, you know what could happen? God can take you and hide you, and when Ahab doesn't find you, he will come back on you. Well, what makes you think that the Spirit will hide Elijah when Elijah's the one that came and said, tell Ahab, I am here? Well, you know what could happen. You know what could go wrong. You know that this could happen or that could happen. Well, what evidence do you have that it will happen? Oh, I don't have any evidence. I just know what could happen. Have you ever started thinking about all the things that could happen? For the Spears last night, and I was a little surprised that he was human. I've known Brother Spears for years. I look up to him as one of the great men of God. We talk on the phone occasionally just to talk. But he mentioned last night, and it's recorded, it's probably on the internet somewhere. There's no taking it back. But he said when his daughter got her license, and she had a curfew, you will be home by 10 o'clock. 10 o'clock came. She wasn't home. 10:05. She wasn't home. 10:15. She wasn't home. And Brother Spears said that he began thinking of every possibility of why she wasn't home that you could think of. I wondered if she had a wreck. He went so far as to start calling the hospitals to see if they had a Jane Doe that had been in a wreck, his daughter's age. He wondered if she had been kidnapped. He wondered if, she was in a ditch somewhere. He went through every scenario that you could think of on what might have happened. Turns out it was something perfectly legit. She was detained. She was fine. Nothing was wrong. But he described the near panic that he felt, all the possibilities, all the things that could go wrong. Now, Brother Spears and Obadiah are the only two people on earth that has ever thought what might happen. Does anybody believe that? Well, what if? What if this happens? What if that happens? What if my wife got killed? When my son was a police officer for years, we got a call early one morning, and he was going after a vehicle. He was chasing a vehicle. Somehow he lost control. He crashed his cruiser in so many ways. Because I was with the police department, I got every one of the photos. We went down to the county garage, saw the car, the cruiser, and it's like, oh, he could have been killed. He was life-flighted to UC, but he was fine later. Oh, he could have been killed. To give you an idea, most of you know that they wear a badge, and they've got a little place that's reinforced to hold their badge in place. He hit 2 trees so hard, they found his badge underneath the car on the bottom rail, under the car on the passenger side. That's how hard he hit. Oh, he could have been paralyzed. This could have happened. That could have happened. Why, if I go tell Ahab, the Holy Spirit could move you. Ahab could kill me. See, that's what happened when you start thinking yourself. He wasn't some backslidden person before. He was a great man of God who had showed boldness, and he was unafraid of standing against Jezebel. But now delivering one simple sentence sends terror through him. I remember our kids were young. You'll find out much sooner than you want to. It's like, oh, I hope he doesn't get in a wreck. I hope he doesn't get killed. I hope he doesn't get shot by a drive-by shooter. I hope he doesn't get kidnapped. I hope our daughter doesn't get raped. I hope this could happen, this could happen. this could happen. And if you allow it, you can go into a full-blown panic attack over what could happen. When we were in Texas, we were in the emergency room so much with 3 kids that when we walked in, the nurses, oh, the Ellises are here again. Which child is it this time? I mean, we were there constantly. You know what dangers there are playing in the backyard? You know how many ways they can get hurt? You know how many ways they can get killed? And Obadiah began to think, what if? I believe it was Brother Spears that brought out. It was either him or someone I was listening to on the radio. Are you ready for this one? I know you are. What if Biden wins 4 more years? Talk about petrifying. What can happen? What can go wrong? And when he began thinking what can go wrong, he began to make excuses why he could not go. He began to point out all the good deeds that he had done previously. Why, Elijah, don't you know that I hid 100 prophets? Don't you know that I fed them with bread and water? Don't you know what an outstanding Christian I have been prior to this point? Don't you know what I've already done? And now you're asking me to do more? I've already done enough. I've already done more than most people. No one else hid 100 prophets. No one else fed them with bread and water every day. Out of all the people, I am the only one that had the courage to hide them and feed them. Don't you know what I have accomplished? Do you ever try to tell God what you've done to avoid what God's telling you to do? Lord, I've done my share. It's somebody else's job now. I've been faithful for 50 years. Now it's somebody else's turn. Sorry. Christians never should stop serving. I've used Moses, 80 years young, when God called him to lead roughly 2.5 million people out of Egypt. I'm too old. Well, you may not be able to do some things, but God's not through with you yet. If you're alive and you're breathing, God still has something for you to do. Well, Lord, I can't hardly walk. You can sit, can't you? You can dial a phone, can't you? You can write, can't you? we begin immediately to think the worst. Satan is a master. Actually, he is better than a master. Satan is got it down to a science of putting thoughts into your mind to get you to turn your eyes off of God. Why, I'm 78 years old. God's not through with me. I'm 98. There was a gentleman over at Independence for many years. He was 95 years old when he broke his leg and they had to move him to a nursing home. 95. And he was still as active as anybody you have ever met until he broke his hip. Well, what if this happens? If God's called you to deliver the message, don't worry about what if. Don't worry about what God may change his mind. Listen, God cannot, does not, will not change his mind. If he told you to do something, you can guarantee he will see to it that it is done. What you did last year, what you did 20 years ago, what you did 30 years ago may have been wonderful, but it doesn't relieve you of your responsibility today. Today. Well, in verse 15, Elijah gives him assurance, and he finally agrees to deliver the message to Ahab. You know the rest of the story. Elijah did meet Ahab. Obadiah did not get killed, and God sent rain after 3.5 years of famine. Many people that I know, and I'm not talking just to those of us who are over 50 or 60, talking to every one of us. What if? What if? What if will drive you crazy? What if will make you mad? And I don't mean angry mad. I mean, it'll drive you madder than a mad dog with rabies. What if will keep your eyes off of God? What if will keep you off of being faithful right now? What if? Just obey what God said. He'll take care of the